Greetings, math fans. All right, so this is day 4 of radicals, and basically what we're going to do is simplify radicals that are in fraction form. Okay, so let me just kind of start out with the first problem here. So this is day 4, and this is basically simplifying radical fractions. Okay. So here's just an example. If I give you guys a square root of 4 over 25, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to type this in your calculator and type in 4 over 25 and then hit the square root button and then get a decimal. Okay. So really for all these problems, there are no decimals. It's very important. No decimals. If you give me a decimal, that means you use your calculator for the whole thing and I won't give you any credit for it. Okay. And Harper won't give you any credit for it either. So here's the deal. You're allowed to, if it's all under one radical, as long as it's the same, well, it is one radical. So what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to do this. Square root of 4 over square root of 25. You're allowed to split up. So that's what you want to do. Split up. Okay? So it makes it actually really easy because what's the square root of 4? 2. What's the square root of 25? 5. And that's your answer, 2/5. Okay? So it's like super easy to do this kind of problem. So how about the cube root? Let's do a cube root. Cube root of 8 over 125. All right, so once again, you're going to use your calculator. You guys should know if it's cube root or even the square root, you can hit the square root button like for the first problem I did, or you can hit the cube root. So we're going to rewrite this as the cube root of 8 over the cube root of 125. Okay, and you put that in your calculator and you're going to get 2/5. Okay, it's really easy. Let's do one with a variable in it. Again, not a difficult thing. So if I said the square root of, let's do 144 over x to the 8th. Okay, I can write that as the square root of 144, the square root of x to the 8th. Okay, square root of 144 is 12. Put that in your calculator. Remember what you do when you take the square root, because remember there's a 2 here, you're going to say 8 divided by 2, which is 4. And so you're going to get x to the 4th. Remember that was the square root of x squared, that would just be x. The square, or let's say the cube root of x to the 12th, that would be x to the 4th, because it would be 12 divided by 3, which is 4. Okay, just kind of recall a little in your brain here some of the stuff. Okay, so super easy. You basically just need to split it up and you're good to go. All right. So let's see. Let's do a couple of crazy ones. Not really too crazy, but let's say where variables don't cancel out. Most of the time, the number is going to be good. Okay, but if I do something like this, let's say I do the square root of, so I'm just going to put a 2 here, even though you usually don't see a 2. So let's say I do the square root of 25x to the 7th over 16y to the 5th. All right, so let's make this the 6th because this is good, to the 6th. Okay, so here's the deal. You're going to split this up, 25x to the 7th over square root of 16y to the 6th. And then you're going to say, oh, what's the square root of 25? Well, it's 5. And remember I told you how to do this. Let me just write it on the side here. The square root of x to the 7th, since that's a 2 here, right, the square root, you're looking for number, or 2 goes into a number that's less than or equal to 7, right? The small or the biggest number. So do you guys agree 2 goes into 6? Okay, so I can write this as x to the 6th times x to the 1st. We talked about this many times already. So you need to write it like that because that 2, which is the square root, that 2 needs to go into that number. So remember, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So anyway, basically you're going to say is 5, and then it's x to the third, because you took the square root of x to the sixth, and what do you have left over? X to the first. Okay? And the bottom's a little bit easier because the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of y to the sixth that's an even number, so it's basically 6 divided by 2 is 3. So y cubed, so it's just y cubed. And that's your answer. So a little crazier. And the only reason you get it a little crazier because you got something left over with the x, which we've done a lot of times already. Okay? So let's do another one here. If I did the cube root of 64 x to the eighth over 125 y to the 12th. Okay, so let's split it up. Cube root. So guys, really the only thing I'm doing here, I'm literally, the splitting up part is the only new thing that we're learning here right now. Okay, as soon as I write 64x to the eighth and then the cube root of 125 y to the 12th, as soon as I write this is all from a couple days ago's lesson. If I said, hey, what's the cube root of 64x to the eighth? Or what's the cube root of 125 y to the 12th? So there's nothing really new here except you're splitting it up. All right, so you guys should, first of all, the cube root of 64 is 4. And that x to the eighth is x to the sixth times x squared. And the cube root of 125 is 5. And basically, remember, 3 goes into 12 evenly, so that's perfect. So it's 12 divided by 3, which is 4. So it's y to the fourth. So I just have to deal with the cube root of x to the sixth, which, remember, you divide it by 6 divided by 3 is 2. So my final answer comes out to be 4, and then 6 divided by 3 is 2. So x squared, you got a cube root of x squared left over. And the bottom is 5y to the fourth. And that's your final answer. Okay? So that's not bad. Right? Pretty easy stuff. Okay. In your homework, you're going to see a couple more review problems. Just make sure you know what you're doing with, if I give you something like, I don't know, 8 to the 4/3 power. All right, you guys should know how to do that. You type in 8, you can do it several ways, like this, 4/3 power, or 8 raised to the 4, and use the fraction button, something like that, okay? But if you do that, you will get 16 as your answer, okay? So just make sure you know how to do that. If there was a negative in front, if it's in parentheses, then make sure you put that in parentheses. If it's not in parentheses, don't put it in parentheses. If it was just negative 8 to the 4/3 power, then don't put it in parentheses. Okay, so just make sure you know what you're doing. All right, so you saw problems where you had to split it up. Now I'm going to give you problems where you got to put it together. Okay, but it's pretty easy. So here's the deal. I'm going to give you guys the square root of 35x over the square root of 7x. Now you're like, oh man, the square root of 35x, I have no idea what that is. Well, here's the deal. If you recognize, guys, you see how the 35 over 7 can simplify and the x over x can simplify? Well, the deal is, let me get rid of those little things there. I can actually put this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that's equal to the square root of 35x over 7x. Okay? So I just put it together because now what's 35 over 7? 5. What's x over x? Cancels. This is my final answer, guys. Square root of 5. Okay, don't go, oh, I can't take the square root of 5. You're right. You can't take the square root of 5. It's just, that's what it is. The answer is square root of 5. No big deal. Okay? Let me do another one here. The square root of 48x to the fifth over the square root of 6. Well, let's do 12. 12 x to the first. Okay? Again, it looks brutal, but you know what? Put it together. So 48 x to the fifth over 12 x to the first. Okay, 48 over 12. Put it in your calculator. It's 4 x to the fifth over x to the first. Remember, it's a battle between the x's, and who wins? The top wins by 4, so it's x to the fourth. Now I can simplify this one. Okay, the other one I couldn't simplify because square root of 5 is square root of 5. This one, what's the square root of 4? 2. And what's the square root of x to the fourth? Remember, it's 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So it's 2x squared is your final answer. Okay? It's not bad. Let's do a couple more here. How about this one? How about the cube root of 32 x to the seventh over the cube root of 2 x squared? That's a pretty good problem. I like that one. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it as one radical. 32 divided by 2 is 16. X to the seventh divided by x squared is x to the fifth. Okay, now you should be able to simplify that. If it comes out to be like x to the fifth, or sorry, the square root of 5, so I meant to say, or you know, the cube root of 21, something that's odd and you can't simplify it. If it comes out to be a fraction when you simplify it, then you don't simplify it. Okay, but this one I can, and again, this is from the previous day. You should look at that 16. Oh, by the way, it's a cube root, and you should start breaking that 16 up. Well, if you broke it up, you'd say it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's 16. Okay, and then x to the fifth. So x to the fifth, remember, it's the cube root, so it's going to be x cubed times x squared. So you're looking for 3 of a kind here, 3 of the 2's. So I can bring the 2 out, and I can take this guy out here too. The cube root of x cubed is x. Okay, and what do I have left over? I have this left over and this left over. So inside you get 2x squared, and that's my final answer. It's the cube root of that. I keep forgetting to write that. Okay, so that was a little tricky. It was kind of combining some more stuff that we learned, back in the day, but it's really not that bad. Okay, let's do one more, and then I'm going to do a couple of your homework problems with you guys because a couple of them are pretty tricky here. So let's do the cube root of, let's do 64 x to the seventh over the cube root of 2x squared. How's that? I like that one. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Cube root of 64 x to the seventh over 2x squared. So it gives me the cube root of 32 x to the fifth. Okay, you guys should do that, right? 7 minus 2 is 5. 64 over 2 is 32. Okay, cool. So 32. I'm going to start dividing it by 2's. Right? So it's actually 2 times 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Oops, 32. Okay, so that's the cube root of 32 because 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. X to the fifth, so this is going to be x cubed, x squared, right? Because it's got to be in multiples of 3. All right, so here's what we're taking out. The cube root, that comes out, and that comes out. So we get the cube, oops, let's erase this here. So we get, let me put the cube root here. What are we taking out? We're taking a 2 out. And what do we have left over? We have that left over and that left over. So we take out the 2, right? 3 2's, so we take out 2, and also the cubed, x cubed. The cube root of x cubed is just x. You know what's left over? The stuff in blue, so it's 4x squared. That's your final answer. Okay, it's not bad. All right, I want to do two. First of all, I want to do two of the problems in your homework because I think they're pretty challenging. Okay, so it's going to be the cube root of 96 a to the fourth b squared over the cube root of 12a squared b. Okay, so let's write it all out in one cube root. So 96a to the fourth b squared over 12a squared b. All right, so you're going to put this in your calculator. The cube root 96 over 12 gives you 8. And a to the fourth over a squared is a squared, and b squared over b to the first is just b. So this is what you have. All right, let's take the cube root. The only thing I can take the cube root of is the 8. It's the only thing, because that a squared is not big enough, and the b to the first is not big enough. So I can only take the cube root of 8, and everything else is left over inside, a squared b. And that's your final answer. Okay. All right, and then the other one for homework was this one. The cube root of 189 x to the fifth y to the seventh over the cube root of 7x squared y squared. Okay, one cube root. So 189 x to the fifth y to the seventh over 7x squared y squared. Okay, 189 over 7 is 27. So it's the cube root of 27. X to the fifth over x squared. The south or the north wins by 3, so it's x cubed. And 7 over 2, right? The north wins by 5. So this is what it simplifies to without really doing any radical work here. And then I'm going to do is, let me rewrite this. Cube root of 27. That x cubed, I don't need to do anything because that's going to come out perfectly. But the y to the fifth is really y cubed times y squared, right? That gives you y to the fifth. So the cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of x cubed is x. And the cube root of y cubed is y. And the leftover is this guy right here. It's the only thing left over. So it's y squared. And that's your final answer, math fans. Okay? So, you know, it's not too difficult, but you got to practice. It's really a lot of practice with these problems. And once you're good to go, these problems are not that difficult. Just got to apply the same thing over and over and over again. Okay? All right, math fans. That's it. Have an outstanding day. Adios. Goodbye.